Ladies, gentlemen, and tarnished of all ages, it's time to revisit one of my favorite things that we've done in the past, but with a few changes to absolutely maximize the hell out of it, make it even stronger, and take advantage of changes that it's seen in recent patches. Do you like trolls? No, I don't mean those people on the internet that nobody wants anything to do with. I mean the dudes in Elden Ring with big old holes in their chests. Well, how would you feel about becoming one, but even stronger? Today we're taking the Troll's Hammer, an extremely fun colossal weapon, and doing everything physically possible to make it absolutely deck endgame bosses like it's nothing. This build isn't about literally one-shotting anything you come across, but what it does is arguably even cooler and more fun to do. This Ash of War, thanks to some recent changes in patch 1.07, both to the Ash of War specifically and to colossal weapons in general as a weapon type, now has two insanely strong things going for it. First, it does insane poise damage in both parts. The result of this is even against bosses, it only takes a few hits to get a stagger, which means, hey, a big free damage hit for no cost to yourself. But on top of this, the Ash of War itself was buffed to change the poise bonus that it gets while casting, and what this results in is the vast majority of enemy attacks won't even be able to knock you out of the animation once you've started of either the roar or the follow-up slam. For those who don't know, the way that this Ash of War works is you press the input once, you'll do a short range area of effect roar around you. This does pretty decent damage but has fantastic stagger value as well. Then, if you press the heavy attack button soon enough after the roar itself, you'll do a massive wind-up, incredibly strong slam down hit for thousands of damage. Due to the new changes, even spamming the roar itself is actually incredibly good as it can get a stagger surprisingly fast, but of course the follow-up is the big fun part of this. So what are we doing to really take advantage of this then? Well, first things first, the Troll's Hammer weapon specifically is one of the only weapons in the game that both has elemental damage on the weapon and can still be buffed by weapon buffs. And so on top of its innate decent fire damage, we are also using the Blood Flame Blade incantation to give it significantly more fire damage, and then also, the Blood Flame effect itself of slowly applying bleed status for even more power. On top of that, we also have multiple sources of buffs for Roar specifically, which boost the damage of the initial input, and the result, as you're seeing in front of you, is a build that has absolute control over just about any fight that you put it in. It rarely gets staggered, it gets tons of knockdowns with ease, and the damage is pretty great too. As far as PvP goes, this is a bit of a harder one, mostly because both the Roar and follow-up slam have a pretty hefty wind-up to them, which makes them quite hard to hit, but because of the poise that they have, you can abuse any impatience from your enemy to trade with them for a hit that will pretty undoubtedly be bigger than theirs, with the Roar nearly one-shotting when it hits, and the follow-up slam being a guaranteed one-shot on pretty much any player.
I only have to do it once?
With that said, what do we have built up on our character to make this all perform the way that it does? Well, first, of course, is the weapon itself, the Troll's Hammer, and you get this within the Old Altus Tunnel, Mine, and the Altus Plateau. Secondly, we have the Highland Axe in our offhand. This nifty little axe has a passive effect of buffing all roar damage by 10%, which of course is quite strong when used correctly. As well, within this build, we've put the Vacuum Slice Ash of War on it, both as it scales with our stats properly and gives us a ranged option if necessary within the build. Yes, Beast Roar exists as a roar-based projectile skill, but it exclusively scales with dexterity and thus performs much worse in this specific context. As for general combat, you want to have this in your left hand, but then you want to two-hand the Troll's Hammer itself to get the 50% strength boost. The passive of the axe still works like this, so this is the optimal way to use it with the Troll's Hammer. To get this weapon, simply pick it up from the room with the Grafted Scion located here within Stormvale Castle near the Rampart Tower Site of Grace. Then we have our seal, which will be used for casting buffs, but one of the buffs this time does actually scale with our incantation scaling stat, and so the best seal for this is the Aired Tree seal specifically, as we have reasonably high faith going on. You get this from the cell located here under the Prison Town Church Site of Grace in Volcano Manor. As for your armor set, this is mostly just whatever fashion that you feel like, preferably the heaviest armor that you can put on to help tank the actual damage we take during our high poise attacks, with the exception of the helmet, which is best served by being the White Mask helm, as this has a secondary effect that buffs all damage by 10% for 20 seconds after a bleed is procced around you. And while this build doesn't tend to get bleeds very often, it still can get them as we have Blood Flame on this weapon. So you lose pretty much nothing by just using this as your helmet, distributing your weight to bigger pieces in the other slots, and then having the buff proc whenever it just happens to do so. To get this and the rest of the matching armor set, you have to simply defeat the invader that spawns right here in the Lake of Blood by the Mohgwyn Palace, but you have to make sure to do so before killing Mohg himself or it won't happen. Then we come to our talismans, and the first one is of course the Shard of Alexander, which buffs the damage of all weapon skills by 15%, which counts both for the roar and the follow-up slam in this build, and so obviously it is very much worth having around. And in case you somehow don't have this yet, you get it from completing 3 steps. The first is to talk to Alexander in the desert where you fight Radon after his defeat, then the second is in the lava field just southwest of the Water Terminus site of Grace on Mount Gelmir, and then the third is a short run from the Dragon Temple lift site of Grace in crumbling Farum Azula. After this, you'll get the talisman, no problem. Secondly, we want the Roar Medallion. This buffs the damage of all breath and roar-based attacks by 15%, which of course counts the roar portion of our weapon skill, and this stacks with the axe buff too for a total of around 25% damage buff to the roar part itself. You get this by killing the boss at the end of the Limgrave tunnels on the north end of Agheel Lake. The next, we have the Erdtree's Favor +2 talisman for a significant boost to our max HP, max stamina, and equip load, and this is found in this specific location by going backwards from the mountaintop of the giants after the capital is turned to ash. Then finally for talismans is the Dragoncrest Greatshield for a massive boost to our physical damage negation, which allows us to tank even more hits while using our high poise attacks with less repercussions. To acquire this, start from the drainage channel side of Grace in the Haligtree region, go out of the east side and follow along the archways and branches to more archways and more branches until you eventually reach the roof of a building. Once there, drop down the hole in said roof, and on the balcony to your left you will see a chest inside of which is the talisman. There are also some alternate talismans that you can use depending on your playstyle, but I found the tankiness talismans there to be the most useful when combined with our ridiculous poise. If you are so inclined, you can also try out the Lord of Blood's Exultation talisman if you find yourself doing a lot of weapon hits and thus actually proccing bleeds more often, the Dagger Talisman if you choose to actually do the critical hits on the daggers, though more often than not you'll actually get more damage by just using the free time that you get in this dagger to just get in another roar and follow-up hit combo anyways. And then there is also the Fire Scorpion Charm Talisman, which works if a boss is particularly weak to fire damage, as we have a reasonable bound on the weapon and buffing our fire damage increases that. Then for our Wondrous Flask of Physic, the first choice here is clear in the Flame Shrouding Cracked Tier for a 20% boost to all fire damage, as once again we have a fair bit of fire damage on the weapon itself. Then the second slot is somewhat of a personal choice. I would lean towards defensive options, but a max stamina boost isn't a bad idea either, so you can spam the roar and follow up just a little bit more before you need to reset.
Just keep going.
Then we come to our spells, which are of course the classic buff incantations of Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength. Golden Vow buffs all damage by 15% and damage negation by 10% for 80 seconds after casting, and Flame Grant Me Strength gives you a 20% boost to both fire and physical damage for 30 seconds after casting. Then we also have the slightly more unique Blood Flame Blade buff, which we talked about earlier, and you get this incantation by defeating the Teardrop Scarab located just northwest of the Rose Church in Liurnia. With that, you know all of the equipment and spells that you need and where to get them, so let's talk about your attribute split. First up, you want to get 60 strength and 60 faith. The strength is enough so that when you two-hand the weapon it hits the soft cap for damage scaling and then some, and the faith is basically just as much as you can fit, though the only thing that this really affects properly is specifically the fire damage on your weapon hits. Then you want to get 60 vigor, as this is a lovely comfortable amount to play the game with in general. 10 arcane is the requirement for Blood Flame Blade, then the rest of your points split between mind and endurance so you can manage your uses of the weapon skill properly without having to reset forcefully too often. And that's it everyone. A full-on maximized build based around the new and improved Troll's Roar skill and the Troll Hammer as well, which uniquely both has fire on it as a base but also can have buffs applied to it. This thing absolutely torches bosses, staggering them constantly and doing tons of damage with the downtime it's given as well. I hope you've enjoyed this build and I hope you enjoy using it if you try it out for yourself. Let us know down in the comments if you have any more ideas for weapons or skills or spells to make an entire build around in the future. Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.